Welcome to the MacArthur Q&A Part II. I'm Amanda Williams, and joining me is Jim Zobel, the resident expert on all things MacArthur. And we receive thousands of research requests a month via social media, and we really can't just answer all of those questions. But we try to use these MacArthur Q&A sessions to at least attempt to answer some of those. Thank you for submitting your questions today. I think we said we were only going to try to look at 6 to 8 questions. I think as it turns out, we're probably going to answer about 13 of them. So we'll get right into them. First question, Jim. When did the MacArthur family settle in the United States?
Coming from Scotland.
Right.
Yeah, Sarah comes here with her husband, Alexander Majet, and Arthur MacArthur the first, the guy that's the grandfather. They arrived in about 1825, and they go to Massachusetts, and that's where they emigrate to. The thing was that Sarah MacArthur Majet, because she marries this guy Majet before she comes, her maiden name was MacArthur. And so when she comes to America, we know that they had a lot of family that were already here in America from that maternal MacArthur side. We don't know who any of them are, but we know that General MacArthur knew them just from talking with people that were related to him, that they knew about those cousins that they had, but we've lost them. But I've got letters from Arthur MacArthur where he talks about, and this is the grandfather, talks about emigrating here in 1825. So
Okay. Next question. Early 1941, before Pearl Harbor, the eventual first president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee, publishes a book titled Japan Inside Out. In it, Rhee warns that there will be conflict with Japan. Was MacArthur or were any of his staff aware of this book to our knowledge?
I've never seen it brought up in any kind of memoir or oral history or anything like that. The first evidence that we have of MacArthur relating with Rhee is in 1945, right after the war. Rhee was trying to get out to the Pacific and especially get to Korea, and started sending telegrams to MacArthur almost immediately. But it doesn't seem like MacArthur had any real great knowledge of who Rhee was, at that time in 45. Of course, he'll gain a very specific knowledge of him in the years that come after the war. But we don't see anything here, like nobody ever talks about that, or like any kind of pre-warning that anybody had ever read from Syngman Rhee. I've never, at least in our documents, I've never seen anybody talk about that.
Next question. It's hard to believe that America's leaders didn't learn about the Bataan Death March until mid-1943. The Death March was witnessed by thousands of Japanese and Filipinos. Neutral embassies and businessmen in Manila would have heard about this within a few days and would have reported this to the Americans. Did the FDR administration hide this information from the public to protect the Europe First policy?
Well, in modern day terms, yeah, you would think that the information would get there, but you're under a military regime that has taken total control. They're chaining people to lampposts in the streets. Filipinos that were trying to help Americans on the Death March were getting burned to death, on the side of the road, massacred. It wasn't someplace that you went and took a look. And I doubt there was a lot of neutrals that were like, hey, I'm going to go take a look at what's going on in Bataan. They were all hiding away, trying not to end up like the rest of people. So to say that, these people would have known, I don't agree with that at all. Back then, it's not that easy to get from Bataan to Manila, especially right after the end of the campaign, when you've got this going on. So no, I don't agree with that at all. Damon Gauze sails out to Australia. You've got those guys from the USS Quail that sail out to Australia. You've got Charlie Smith, who sails out to Australia. None of these guys know because they hadn't seen it. The guys on Corregidor didn't know. and they're just, 3 miles across the water. I mean, when they get to Cabanatuan in early June, they're like, holy God, what has taken place? What happened to y'all? So, sorry, I got so emotional, but no, I don't agree with that at all.
But I mean, it is true that the administration actively keeps that information from the public when the word is out, though.
Yeah, they've got those exchange ships that are in the middle. The Gripsum is in the middle of transit, and they've got that working, and they don't want to mess that up. And then they wonder, if they release this information, is that going to make it harder for the people that are in the camps? Then it comes with the story that Diaz has given to the Chicago Tribune, which is going to break in February of 44. After Diaz is dead already, and is that did they let it go because Diaz is already gone, at that point, the one who escapes from the Davao penal colony, that gets back to the States earliest. He was the one that witnessed the death march and everything. So yeah, they hold off on it because of those things and throughout 1943, and then they debate it, but then they finally just say, yeah, release it. So
Next question. What battles was General MacArthur directly involved in during the New Guinea campaign?
what you mean, like out there throwing hand grenades and stuff?
Yeah, I guess that would be none of them.
Well, I mean, he was famous. He walked around with a bag of hand grenades, just lobbing them left and right. No, he even back in World War One, he thought his thing was to direct, not to engage in the conflict. And so he'll land at Admiralties is the first big one. I mean, he's involved in all the planning. He's involved in all the schematics going on with everything and working with all the people, giving the operations to Kruger. Kruger figures it out. We've talked about all that, but he's heavily involved with all that. He's not, devoid of being part of any of that. January of 44, this news article comes out saying, MacArthur's never been at the front, And here's MacArthur, 64 years old now. Man, I got to prove myself all over again, and we talked about that. But yeah, then he goes into the Admiralties and lands with, after the first couple of hours, and all those first cavalry guys were like, what's he doing here? He doesn't need to be here. And they all went from, hearing Dugout Doug to thinking he was the king, like overnight. And then basically he goes in at Hollandia a couple hours after. He spends 3 hours there on the beach, walks up and down. People are still taking pot shots. So, I mean, he's putting himself out there, but, he's, the only time I think he gets into like a area where there's a firefight, that gets kind of serious is when he's there at San Manuel in the Philippines, when he's trying to prompt that drive on Manila. But no, he's not like Jens Doe or these regimental commanders that are out there at the front, or these brigadier generals that are out there at the front with them. He's the theater commander, and people are like, what are you doing out here? This is crazy. You shouldn't be here at all. But with MacArthur, you can't win, either way. You go out there, oh, he's just, being a show off. If he's back there, oh, he's hiding in the tunnel. It's like, you can't have it both ways, people. Make up your mind. So,
And there are general officers that are killed in World War II.
Sure,
And,
yeah.
there weren't there directives like you at a certain level, you are not supposed to be in these situations.
MacArthur ordered Kruger not to do it, and then Kruger was kind of ticked off because here goes MacArthur landing in the Admiralties,
but
like,
he's not allowed to.
I mean, he's not going to say anything, but he's like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. But they're all on the beach at Hollandia, Eichelberger's there on the beach, and so's Kruger, and Fuller and the rest of them. So
Okay, next question. What was General MacArthur aware of regarding the Korean Peninsula during the Japanese occupation?
That we don't really know. once again, he doesn't talk about it a lot. I mean, it's on the radar because, as the war is coming to an end and they're, figuring out all these plans for occupation, Korea is a part of it. But MacArthur from 45 to 48, he gives that to Hodge. This is Lieutenant General John Hodge as 24th Corps. And Hodge is having a lot of problems because, this is a brand new government that's, springing in, after being suppressed by the Japanese for, over 30 years. And you've got all these different people coming out of the woodwork and they're all assassinating each other. And you've got a hard time, trying to bring this democratic assembly. And then you've got Rhee in there, kind of dominating. And then you've got the communist activity going on with everything. And Hodge is always looking to MacArthur, like, hey, we got these problems. I need to come talk to you. And MacArthur's always saying, no, you're doing a great job. You take care of it. I've got enough problems over here. This is why I've got you over there, because you're the smart guy, and he's got, like, I've got full confidence in you. But I think that, MacArthur knew what a headache it was and was just glad that he had someone else that he could put it off on. I mean, once he gets there into Japan, yeah, he knows a lot about what's going on in Korea and is pretty heads up on it, because you've got intel briefs every day. You've got Soviet activity in North Korea. Later on, and after they pull out and that Unkirk group goes in there, talking about having free elections, and you've already got Syngman Rhee in there, and you've already got Kim Il-sung, established in there, and then kind of the State Department takes over, and MacArthur doesn't want his hands on it then because they've got nothing to fight with. And he just like, you're going to put these people in there just to get creamed. Why are we putting, people in there at all? And the State Department takes over, where you have 500 Korean military advisors, there that are there when the war starts. So from 45 to 48, he's dependent on Hodge, completely and totally. I mean, he's meeting with Rhee. He's got Rhee coming to, Korea. He goes over there for the Independence Day and, pledges that he'll defend Korea like California, but it's when it, really gears up in 50 that MacArthur really takes a, the serious, approach to it.
Right. Next question. What was it like to work with General MacArthur? What was his management style? Was he a delegator, micromanager, temperamental, or always formal?
Well, I like what Dane Barbie described, and he's that amphibious guru, of the Southwest Pacific area. And, when he shows up and sees MacArthur the first time, MacArthur's just like, your job is, to get me to the Philippines, and that's all, and he's like, this is, your establishment, you go take care of it. You run it. I don't want to hear from you. You got any problems, you bring it to me. And that's MacArthur's style. It's like, if you can't run it, then you're not the right guy to be in that job. And Barbie says he can't stand MacArthur. There's no warmth about him. It's all military matters. So I guess it's all formal, military, never anything else. But he says he's the best boss he ever had because he gave him the job, gave him the leeway to do what he needed, gave him everything he needed, to do the job. And MacArthur never hassled him, or never, really, got in his way. And that's the way MacArthur was with a lot of these people, but then you've got the other side where he's going to be playing, Kruger and Eichelberger off against each other. And so you've got a lot of, it's not for them to know when I'm being dramatic, it's only for me to know, like that line from Patton, it's like, they don't know when you're joking, General, but it's really Sutherland that's the killer. Sutherland's the guy that, is the hatchet man. MacArthur comes off looking as, like, oh, my boy, you're going to win this war for me. And then Sutherland comes out there, don't get your head, too big, son, because I'm the one that's going to chop it off. And so it kind of works like that, when you have those special security officers that run the code breaking, and they do the interacting with Washington and everything. I mean, they go see MacArthur and he's like, yes, you are my key person. And they're like, oh, wow, this is great. And then they leave the office and And everybody else is like, there, hold on, boy. Everybody else is like the one with the dagger. It's never MacArthur that's that way. But like World War One, when he's in that, chief of staff, point, he knows how to pick the people. Okay, this guy knows how to write a report. This guy knows how to read that intel and talk, but he can't write. This guy, he's real good at going out there and figuring this out, but they can't do anything else. So he gets these people that are perfect for running, things while he's out in the trenches and stuff like that. And it's funny because the other commanders saw how good MacArthur's staff worked, and so they would grab these people, but I always say, like, they didn't realize this guy was the bean counter, and if you put him outside of a job outside of the bean counter, he's totally worthless, and so
Right.
so MacArthur had that ability to pick people like that, and that's what everybody said, about that World War I staff, and they think he's, can't do any wrong because it's right up on display in the museum, that gold cigarette case, that the staff gives to the chief when he leaves, and it says "to the bravest of the brave," and they've all seen him, And so how's it to work? I mean, there's a lot of people that think he's a blowhard and whatnot, like Biter Linden in the G4 during the occupation. He's just like, blah. And there's a lot of people, I know today that are still like that, but it's just, it's who he is, and he's effective at getting people working, and that's the main thing.
I think it's interesting to think of him as the good cop. Sutherland and the others is the bad cop sometimes.
Right.
I hadn't thought about it that way before, but yeah. And I think in the question they mentioned, was he always formal? And I think, no, I mean, I think I would have been more afraid of him if he was very formal with me in a meeting as opposed to welcoming, and you're my commander, you're my, it seems like he's very kind of informal with them. But I imagine if he strikes that formal tone, it might not be a good situation.
They say he never rages, I mean, he'll get on these diatribes with people, and that he feels like he can do that with, or maybe he wants to give them an impression that he's in a diatribe, because I wonder a lot about that too, because usually he goes on these diatribes in front of people who he knows are going to blab it to everyone else.
Okay. Yeah.
But usually he's very calm about things, like when that guy at West Point, that was on his staff that released that newspaper that went against the West Point hierarchy, and when he was superintendent. And this was Archibald Arnold, who will run 7th Division in World War II under him, but like he calls Arnold in, young TAC officer, and he's like, I gave you free leeway to do all this stuff. And he's like, yes, sir, you did. And he's like, how did this newspaper, get out there? And he's like, well, I don't really have an answer. He's like, well, you're going to find yourself, out somewhere else tomorrow. It's been nice having you, but you'll be leaving us now, so it's like this, it's not really he's raging on him. It's just like, you let me down, and I'm going to let you know, that you let me down.
All right, next question. What was General MacArthur's post-war relationship with some of his peers, namely Fletcher, Spruance, and Nimitz?
Well, the last he sees of Spruance and Nimitz were there 45, 46, in Japan after the war. Nimitz, when he takes off, MacArthur will write him, that it's just a simple place now. And he'll say the same thing with Halsey, the grandeur has left the Pacific, now that you guys have left the stage, and I think he doesn't see them, he'll see Halsey again. He'll see Halsey many times before Halsey's death, because they are true friends, and Halsey will die kind of early, like in the mid-50s or so. But Spruance, he sees right after the war. And people are like, he's just going to talk. You go see him, you're just going to sit there while he talks and talks and talks, and you're not going to be able to get a word in. And Spruance goes and sees him, and MacArthur knows Spruance is a fighter. and he's enamored with that principle in certain people, And Spruan said he just sat there, gripping the chair as he told him about Midway, Philippine Sea, all these battles, that MacArthur didn't say a word the whole time because he was just gripped, wanting to hear this. So, it was a total flip on that. Of Nimitz, he'll write, till the end of his days, greatest admiral ever produced. All those Army guys, he'll see them every year. They're all at the Waldorf Astoria for that birthday party, every year for Douglas MacArthur. So Kruger, will be there all the time.
Except for
yeah,
Eichelberger. We were just talking about
yeah,
that.
except for
morning.
Eichelberger.
Except for
Eichelberger
him.
is very upset when he leaves in 48 because he doesn't get that 4th star, and he'll
Right.
blame MacArthur, the whole time. Now Clovis Byers, his Eichelberger's chief of staff, he'll go to those parties, but Eichelberger will not. Now, the interesting thing is, people said he went to his grave just, hating MacArthur. And yesterday, I just found MacArthur got very sick in 1960 and had to go in the hospital and have an operation. And I found a letter that Eichelberger wrote Gene, in that time period. And he dies just that next year, the 1961. So who knows if there might have been some kind of rapprochement, with them. Because if Eichelberger had come to those swap-up parties, everybody would have been ecstatic. It was like, finally, and I think MacArthur would have been too. But the chiefs of staff will go to those. The George Decker will go to those. Arleigh Burke will go to those. So MacArthur's still very much seeing the hierarchy. He'll see Eisenhower as late as I think the last time was maybe 56. 56 when he goes to the White House. But he's pretty much locked up in that tower. Albert Wedemeyer will come see him a lot during that 52 convention when Wedemeyer was trying to get MacArthur to back Taft. And he'll correspond with all these people, but he really doesn't go anywhere. A few places, but he, after he comes home, he's sick. He's sick pretty much all the time. And he's sick of crowds, I think, and doesn't go anywhere.
Next question. Fraser Hunt covered everything about MacArthur from World War I to Korea. Are there any other firsthand biographies of MacArthur that are as detailed as Hunt's and written by someone who knew MacArthur over many decades, like Hunt's MacArthur biography?
Yeah, that's the thing. Hunt is there with the rainbow in World War I. And so that's, I like that book because, it's from his memory of things that he saw, especially there at the Côte de Châtillon. It's pretty good. You get towards the later parts of it, and it's all MacArthur's side of the story as far as Korea goes. But yeah, Hunt did know him, and that guy was crazy. He's a wild man. After the war, I took like a dog sled from the Ukraine all the way to Vladivostok, or something like that. He was just a nut. I mean, that's something else. But he was big friends with Bonner Fellers. I think they're kind of related. And so that was his to MacArthur in those later years was, through Bonner Fellers. But no, I mean, Considine knew him, I think in the 40s, but not very well, just a newspaper reporter. The one that everybody regrets didn't write a book was Larry Larrabus. Larrabus was MacArthur's aide in World War II, and he was a newspaper man that knew MacArthur back, into the 30s and knew him pretty well, and covered a lot of those stories. He'd also, been a guy who covered World War I quite a bit, and we're not real sure how far back their relationship went. But when MacArthur showed up in Australia, and George Brett was in command there, and MacArthur was going to get rid of Brett real quick. And it was funny because Brett came to meet him at that Spencer Railroad station there in March 20th, right after the escape from Corregidor. And Brett kind of like comes up to see, shake hands with MacArthur, and MacArthur's like, Larry Larrabus, because Larrabus is in the back row, and he like goes over, it's like, Larry, and I think like Larry gets in the car with him, and Brett does it at that point or something like that. So, but he doesn't write anything, and never does. But yeah, Egeberg, all these guys from World War II that were close to him wrote it. Egeberg wrote one. Huff knew him probably longest, from the mid 30s on. That's a good one. My 15 years with MacArthur. Then you got Weldon Rhodes' book, Flying MacArthur to Victory. That's got a lot of good insight. She mentioned Paul Rodgers, but no, I mean, most of these people, that would have known a lot, weren't that close to him. I mean, he works with the press quite a bit, but nobody's really close to MacArthur except Kazan, maybe a few other people. I think Kazan's the only person that MacArthur can really, besides Gene, let himself, talk to.
Yeah, I think it's very true. I mean, he can have very good working relationships and be very friendly with all of these men that we've been talking about, but they don't know MacArthur the man. I think he's got that shield kind of that prevents that deeper, more intimate connection.
Or what he lets them see.
Well,
Or
it's
what he
always a
tells
show.
them.
Yeah.
Because it is MacArthur, and he tells them a lot of goofy stuff sometimes, where they're just like, man, is he
Is this for real?
Truth? Yeah. It's like when he's with Eichelberger, when I met Herr Hitler, it's like,
right.
You met Hitler?
Well, I always think this, but I think he must have been so hard to know because of a lot of that and because of the myth and legend. I mean, by the time a lot of these guys are meeting him too, he's already a bit of a legend and a myth. So, I mean, it's hard to know him. But all right, next question. During the Korean War, did General MacArthur consider putting nuclear chemicals on the borderline of the Korean Peninsula and China? I've heard that before, but that sounds too weird. Sounds
it is
weird to me too.
It's that cobalt zone, this radioactive material. And it's funny because we've got some telegrams where like scientist people were asking about this. Why don't you lay a zone of cobalt, up on the border? And so when he goes to see Eisenhower, right before he becomes president, and gives him that plan on winning the war, he's like, we'll sow this, we can sow this by ox cart, up on the border, so just shoveling out radioactive material right on the border. So yeah, that's one of the goofy ones. But he does say it. And, I think when he gives those interviews with Considine and Lucas in 54, on his birthday, he says that again, we could have sowed this miles long or wide belt of, radioactive material that would have kept the Chinese from coming into North Korea. So,
but he never says that during the war. All of that is
not that I've ever seen.
Way later.
Yeah, not that anybody's ever seen, but I mean, that he delivers this to Eisenhower, and I think it's like December of 52, right before Eisenhower takes over. So that's more than a year and a half after he's been gone, from Korea. And I'm sure he's just been over there fomenting all these plans of, how he could have, won that war,
Is there any General MacArthur Day in another country that is celebrated on an annual basis?
I don't think anymore. The Australians, when MacArthur showed up in Australia Day is January 26th, their founding. And so that became like when they celebrated it, I think that first year, the 43, and then in 44, 45, people just would call it that as well. But that was like, I think the only time it was celebrated anywhere. I don't know about the Philippines though, if they ever had something but I don't think so. The only place I've ever heard of it was in Australia during the war. I don't think anybody does.
Not in the occupation at all. It wouldn't have been like I
don't think
holiday.
So. I've never seen it. I mean, maybe. I mean, they might, but I don't think modern day anywhere. We would have heard about that. No. I mean, the only place I think that celebrates it is us. Because we have the Australia Day with the Australians every year, which is a lot of fun. So.
All right. Is there a General MacArthur Award given out as a college scholarship, an academic chair for excellence, or just a medal for excellence?
Yeah, of course. The foundation partnered with the U.S. Army, and they give out the MacArthur Leadership Award to like the top or the people that meet the criteria, like captains and majors. I think that it's for those junior officers before they reach that colonel level. They also give an ROTC award. They have ROTC people that apply for that same type of leadership award, and that goes out to them. And then I believe Columbia still has the chair in MacArthur history. That was set up, not MacArthur history, but it's the MacArthur chair in history that was set up in the early 1960s there at Columbia when Arthur was going there. And so I believe that's still in existence. They had hoped that they would have something like that here in Norfolk at ODU when they first set up, the International Research Center and everything. They wanted to have a chair in history over there at ODU, but I don't think that ever panned out.
No. Um, and I think they give some writing awards to the different staff colleges.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and most importantly, there's all those sports trophies named after MacArthur that are still given to
Well,
best
yeah. I mean,
college football team, the
yeah.
MacArthur Trophy. There's the Norfolk Sports Club MacArthur Trophy.
Yeah.
So there's lots of MacArthur awards. We give some of them, and then other organizations give them as well. All right. Well, Jim, that's it. That's all for MacArthur Q&A Part II. So thank
Great.
you. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for submitting these questions. Please keep them coming. We will do a Q&A Part III in the future.